Ladies and gentlemen, everyone carries a vision of a better life somewhere deep inside them. But that vision does not become real through grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It becomes real through small, deliberate actions repeated every single day without exception. I did not begin this journey with wealth, connections, or favorable circumstances. What I had were habits, quiet and unglamorous, built one day at a time that gradually constructed the life I now live. You do not need to overhaul your entire existence in a single night. You only need to change how you spend your days, because your days are the raw material of your destiny. So today, let us examine 10 small daily habits that, when practiced consistently, have the power to permanently alter the course of your life. Habit 1. Honor the promises you make to yourself. Every person alive has made a declaration to themselves at some point. I will rise earlier tomorrow. I will discipline my diet starting next week. I will set money aside beginning next month. And yet, tomorrow slides into next week dissolves into next month, and that month quietly vanishes without a trace. The issue is not laziness. The issue is that we become highly skilled at constructing elaborate justifications for our own inaction. I once spoke with a young man and asked him why he had abandoned his fitness routine. He told me he had not abandoned it, that he was simply on an extended break. When I pressed him on the length of that break, he admitted had been going on since 2019. The room responded with laughter, but there is nothing genuinely amusing about it. That story is the mirror most people refuse to look into. We are extraordinarily forgiving toward others, yet we carry a quiet, internal ledger of every promise we made to ourselves and failed to keep. Each broken self-promise chips away at the foundation of your confidence. People commonly believe confidence is born from motivation or enthusiasm, but that is incorrect. Confidence is built on a single thing, the track record of trusting your own word. If a close friend told you every single day that things would be different and they never were, you would eventually stop believing in anything they said. That is precisely what happens within you when you repeatedly fail to follow through on your own commitments. Your own mind stops trusting you, and from that distrust, self-doubt is quietly manufactured. Consider the annual ritual of New Year resolutions. On the first day of January, fitness centers fill with energy and ambition. People arrive wearing new gear, armed with declarations. By the start of February, those same spaces feel abandoned. Success is not constructed out of January promises. It is constructed out of February discipline. You do not need to execute perfectly. You need to execute consistently. If you pledged 20 repetitions and can only complete 5, then complete 5. If you committed to 10 pages and can only manage 2, then read 2. The objective is not flawless completion. The objective is demonstrating to yourself that you can begin and remain. Think of a phone battery reduced to 2% charge. You would not casually continue browsing social media at that point. You would immediately seek a power source. But when your life's energy is running critically low, when exhaustion and doubt have nearly drained you, most people continue scrolling through their own problems rather than doing what it takes to recharge. The way you recharge your inner confidence is by honoring your commitments to yourself. Every small promise kept is a deposit into your account of self-belief. The growth is invisible at first, but one morning you will recognize that you have quietly become someone who says what they mean and does what they say. When that transformation occurs, you will no longer require external motivation. You will have become the source of it. Study anyone who has built something of lasting significance: athletes, builders of companies, devoted parents. They share one defining characteristic. They continue doing what they committed to doing long after the initial excitement that drove the commitment has completely faded. That is the entire formula. Begin with something small. Commit to waking 10 minutes earlier and follow through. Commit to setting aside $1 a day and follow through. Commit to a single moment of intentional reflection before sleep and follow through. Because success does not begin with the world believing in you. It begins with you believing in yourself. Keep your promises to yourself, and in time the world will take every word you speak seriously. Habit 2 design tomorrow before you close your eyes tonight. The majority of people end their nights the same way, phone in hand, cycling through entertainment, responding to messages, consuming content that means nothing. Then morning arrives and they wake up disoriented, already behind, already reactive. They blame their circumstances, their schedule, their environment. But the real culprit is the absence of a plan. They went to bed with a full mind and woke up with no direction. The most effective people I have ever studied do not begin their day when the alarm sounds. They begin the night before. Before sleep, they already know exactly what they will focus on, what demands their attention, and what can be deferred without consequence. When you plan tomorrow tonight, your brain rests with a destination already loaded. When you skip that process, your brain spends the night wandering, processing unresolved questions without direction. This is why some people wake up feeling exhausted despite sleeping for 8 hours. Their mind was working all night on problems it was never prepared to solve. You do not need an elaborate system. You need 3 categories written down before you sleep. What must be done without exception? What should be done if circumstances allow? What can be done if time remains? That exercise takes no more than 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes can easily save you 2 or 3 hours of reactive chaos the following day. Think about how commercial aviation operates. Every aircraft follows a flight plan prepared well before takeoff. Imagine a pilot waking up and deciding to simply go airborne and figure out the destination mid-flight. That would be catastrophic. Yet that is the operating model of most people's lives. They launch themselves into each day without coordinates and then feel frustrated that they are not arriving where they intended. The people who claim they do not need to plan, that they prefer to improvise, are typically the same people who completely unravel the moment one unexpected variable appears. A disrupted connection, a delayed meeting, a missed message, and their entire day collapses. Planning does not eliminate disruption. It simply ensures you are more resilient than whatever disruption arrives. When I began writing down 3 focused intentions each evening, one of which was always personal in nature, I noticed something gradual but undeniable. I was growing. Quietly, daily, without dramatic announcements. And here is something your biology will confirm. The brain is wired to pursue completion. When you write down your intentions for tomorrow, your mind begins processing them before you are even conscious of it. That is why people sometimes wake up with solutions that seem to arrive out of nowhere. It was not random. It was your mind finishing what you started. So tonight, set down the phone, write your plan, and sleep with a destination already in mind. A planned day carries less weight. You will win your mornings, and the person who consistently wins their mornings will eventually win their life. Habit 3. Protect the first 10 minutes of your morning with silence. Most people wake up and within seconds they have already invited the entire world into their mind. Notifications, headlines, messages, social updates, an unrelenting flood of other people's priorities. They then spend the rest of the day wondering why they feel scattered and reactive. The answer is straightforward. They entered someone else's world before they had even established their own. Silence is not a passive experience. Silence is a form of power. When you secure 10 minutes of stillness at the start of your day, you are not doing nothing. You are sharpening the instrument you will use for everything else. You are building mental clarity before the noise begins competing for your attention. I recall a man who told me with visible pride that he was too busy for silence. I pointed out that he could not find 10 minutes for stillness, yet he spent 30 minutes most mornings arguing with strangers in comment sections online. We are not as busy as we claim. We are addicted to stimulation, and we have dressed that addiction up as productivity. When I first attempted morning silence, I could barely sustain 2 minutes of it. My mind behaved like a crowded marketplace, thoughts colliding and overlapping. Check your messages. You owe someone a response. What if something important happened while you were asleep? That internal noise reveals something significant. Most of us can no longer simply sit with ourselves. We have become so conditioned to external input that our own inner voice has been buried under layers of distraction. But with consistent practice, silence begins to reveal something remarkable. Your own thinking, your instincts, your ideas. The world has invested enormous energy into teaching people how to speak, how to project, how to broadcast. It has invested almost nothing in teaching people how to listen inwardly. And yet every meaningful decision, every genuine insight, every creative solution, these arise not in the middle of noise, but in its absence. The ocean presents a calm surface while holding immense depth and power beneath it. That is the quality of mind that silence cultivates. The practice itself is simple. Before you reach for your phone each morning, sit quietly for 10 minutes. No music, no agenda, no replay of yesterday, and no rehearsal of tomorrow. Simply breathe and allow your mind to settle. You will notice that within those 10 minutes, the urgency you usually feel softens. Problems that felt overwhelming begin to reveal their actual scale. Ideas begin surfacing. One of the most commercially successful people I have had the opportunity to know told me that his most consequential business decisions never came during frantic activity. They came in quiet. We chase answers in the external world while they wait patiently in the internal one. 10 minutes of silence each morning will look like nothing to the outside observer, but it is precisely that habit that separates people who spend their days reacting from people who spend their days leading. Habit 4. Feed your mind something new every single day. There is a widespread belief that learning is a phase of life, something that occupies your youth and concludes the moment you enter the professional world. Degrees are earned, books are closed, and streaming platforms take over. Then years pass and people sit with a quiet, uncomfortable feeling that life has stalled. That feeling has a cause. The mind that stops learning begins to atrophy. The world does not pause while you coast. Technology accelerates. Industries shift. Information compounds. If you are not continuously learning, you are not maintaining your position. You are slowly falling behind, regardless of how stable things may appear on the surface. A young man once told me that reading was not his preference because he found it tedious. I asked him directly whether he found financial struggle more interesting. He laughed. I was not joking. The relationship between intellectual curiosity and material outcomes is not accidental. They are tightly connected. Learning does not demand hours of sacrifice each day. It demands 10 consistent minutes of intentional input. A well-selected book, a substantive podcast, a conversation with someone whose thinking is further developed than your own. A single lecture or lesson that challenges an assumption you have been carrying. The medium matters far less than the intention behind it. We occupy what is arguably the most information-rich era in human history. The device in your pocket contains more accessible knowledge than any library of previous generations. And yet, the dominant use of that device is entertainment, social performance, and the consumption of content that leaves no useful residue. When I made the commitment to learn something meaningful every single day, the world around me did not change, but my relationship with it did. The same obstacles that had previously seemed fixed began to reveal angles I had not noticed. Problems shrank in proportion to the growth of my understanding, and that is the real value of continuous learning. You do not grow by eliminating your challenges. You grow by expanding your capacity to meet them. Every expert alive was once a beginner sitting in confusion, reading things they did not fully grasp, attempting things that did not initially work. The separation between those who advance and those stay stuck is not talent. It is persistence in the face of confusion. Confusion is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that growth is occurring. Before you sleep tonight, ask yourself what you genuinely learned today. If the honest answer is nothing, then the day was incomplete. 360. 5 new ideas acquired over a year, and one of those ideas may permanently alter your trajectory. The world does not compensate people for the knowledge they once acquired. It compensates people for the knowledge they are continuously developing. Habit 5. Move your body without negotiation every single day. People want the results of an active life, without engaging in the activity required to produce them. They describe themselves as tired, but the form of fatigue they are experiencing is not the kind that demands rest. It is the kind produced by prolonged inactivity, by stagnant energy with nowhere to go. The finest automobile ever engineered will deteriorate if left stationary in a garage. Your body operates by the same principle. Every high-performing individual I have studied moves daily. The specifics vary. Some run, some train intensively, some walk, but the constant is that they understand something fundamental about the relationship between physical movement and mental function. Motion generates momentum not only in the body, but in the thinking that directs your life. People commonly wait until they feel motivated before they begin moving. But motivation is rarely the cause of movement. Movement is frequently the cause of motivation. Waiting for the feeling before taking the action is a system that will rarely deliver the result you want. I once had a conversation with a friend who expressed his strong disinterest in structured exercise. I told him to abandon the concept of exercise entirely and simply find a form of movement he did not resent. Walking, dancing, an active game with his children, even the physical energy involved in cleaning and organizing a space. 2 weeks after he began taking morning walks, he described feeling genuinely alive for the first time in months. That was not an exaggeration. That was his nervous system responding to what it had been deprived of. The impact of consistent physical movement on mental and emotional states is consistently underestimated. Skip movement for several consecutive days and you will notice the degradation. Motivation fades, negativity increases, decision-making becomes cloudier. Then take a 30-minute walk and notice how quickly perspective shifts. Your body is not an aesthetic concern. It is the mechanism through which everything else in your life is executed. If that mechanism is neglected, every other ambition you hold becomes harder to pursue. You require no equipment and no financial investment. 10 to 20 minutes of daily movement, done without exception, will produce a compounding return over months and years that no single workout session can replicate. There is a principle worth internalizing here. A person who cannot manage their own physical discipline is poorly positioned to manage anything of greater complexity. Movement is a daily rehearsal of self-command. When you rise and move your body despite resistance, you are demonstrating to yourself that you are the one making the decisions in your own life, that self-respect accumulates. And no visible result of consistent movement is more valuable than that quiet, internal acknowledgement that you kept your word to yourself again today. Habit 6. Speak less and listen with genuine intention. The dominant pattern in modern conversation is that people do not listen in order to understand. They listen when they bother to listen at all in order to locate the pause where they can insert their own prepared response. Before you have finished a thought, the person across from you is already assembling their reply, loading it like a mechanism ready to fire. This is why conversations in the current era so frequently feel like competing broadcasts rather than genuine exchanges. The most intelligent individual in any given room is rarely the one producing the most words. Far more often, it is the one sitting quietly, observing, processing, understanding the dynamics before choosing when and how to contribute. When you speak, you are circulating what you already know. When you genuinely listen, you are acquiring something you did not possess before. Most people, however, are far more interested in appearing intelligent than in actually becoming more so. I was once present in a meeting with a young entrepreneur who commanded every conversation he entered. He interrupted freely, offered opinions on every subject, regardless of his actual familiarity with it, and never paused long enough to allow anyone else's perspective to land. When the session concluded, the senior investor present offered a brief observation. He said the young man was clearly capable, but that his constant speaking made it impossible for him to hear anything useful. The investor said simply, if you are always talking, how do you expect to hear the opportunity when it arrives? That single observation produced more silence in that young man than any formal instruction could have. Restraint in speech is a marker of confidence, not of weakness. The person who needs to fill every available silence with the sound of their own voice is typically operating from insecurity. Truly secure individuals understand that their words gain weight precisely because they are not offered indiscriminately. Scarcity creates value, and this principle applies to language as directly as it applies to anything else. Listening also develops something that speaking never can: genuine empathy and understanding. When you actually hear what someone is communicating beneath the surface level of their words, you begin to understand people rather than merely process them. That shift changes your relationships, your negotiations, your leadership, and your ability to serve others effectively. Practice this deliberately. In your next conversation, instead of preparing your response while the other person is still speaking, make understanding their actual message the entire objective. You will discover that doors open simply because you made another person feel genuinely heard. People gravitate toward individuals who listen with real attention, because in a world full of noise, genuine listening is an extraordinary rarity. Your capacity to listen will produce more return over time than your capacity to speak. The ears are a more powerful instrument than the mouth for anyone serious about building something of substance. Habit 7. Save before you spend, without exception. This is perhaps the most universally known principle of personal financial management, and simultaneously one of the most consistently ignored. Most people do not struggle primarily because their income is insufficient. They struggle because of the sequence in which they deploy their income. They earn, they spend everything they have, and they tell themselves that saving will begin once the amount is larger. But the following month arrives wearing the same clothes as the previous one. The distinction between financial security and financial stress is rarely about income level. It is about the ratio of what you keep to what you earn, and about the discipline to protect that ratio regardless of temptation. I once spoke with a young man who told me his income was too modest to permit saving. I offered him a direct response. Someone who cannot preserve a fraction of a small income will not preserve a fraction of a large one, because the habit of saving is not a mathematical exercise. It is a character exercise. The same impulsiveness that consumes a modest paycheck will consume a substantial one at a proportionally larger scale. There is a cultural pressure, particularly aggressive in the current era of visible consumption, to perform affluence before actually achieving it. People allocate money towards signaling wealth to an audience that is too preoccupied with their own performance to be genuinely impressed. I recall a period in my own life when I made purchasing decisions primarily to occupy a certain image in other people's perception. Eventually, I noticed that the people whose perception I was managing were operating under exactly the same financial instability I was. That realization was clarifying. The practical rule is uncomplicated. When income arrives, immediately separate 10 to 20% of it and treat it as inaccessible. Do not allow it to enter the pool from which your daily decisions draw. If it is visible and available, the temptation to spend it will eventually overcome your intention to save it. Remove the decision from the equation by making the savings automatic and invisible to your spending habits. Over the course of a year, you will find that a financial foundation has been quietly constructed beneath your daily life, and that foundation will provide something no amount of spending can purchase: the security to make decisions from a position of stability rather than desperation. When that foundation exists, you gain the ability to decline opportunities that compromise your values, to wait for the right circumstances rather than accepting unfavorable ones, to operate from choice rather than necessity. That is what savings actually buys. Not things, but freedom. Habit 8. Curate your circle as deliberately as you curate your goals. Your environment operates at a level of influence that exceeds your conscious willpower. You can carry extraordinary internal motivation, and still have it systematically eroded by consistent proximity to people who are oriented towards stagnation, complaint, or cynicism. Energy, like behavior, is contagious, and the people you spend the most time with constitute the primary environment in which your thinking, your standards, and your identity are continuously being shaped. Show me the 5 people who receive the largest share of your time and attention, and the trajectory of your life becomes largely predictable. This is not cynicism. It is pattern recognition based on observable reality. Spend your hours with people who are actively engaged in their own growth, and you will find yourself growing as a byproduct of proximity. Spend your hours with people who have decided that their circumstances are fixed and that complaining about them is the appropriate response, and you will find that orientation beginning to color your own perspective. A young man once came to me genuinely confused about why his consistent effort was not producing visible progress. When I asked about the composition of his daily social environment, he described evenings spent with friends who primarily played games, complained about their circumstances, and treated ambition with mild ridicule. The answer was embedded in his description. You cannot sustain momentum in a direction that your entire environment treats as either naive or threatening. This does not require you to sever relationships abruptly or to adopt a posture of superiority toward people who are not where you want to be. It requires you to manage your most finite resource, your time and attention, with the same intentionality you would apply to any other serious investment. Be present and kind with everyone. Give your concentrated time only to those whose presence actively contributes to the person you are committed to becoming. 3, relationships characterized by genuine mutual growth and honest challenge are worth more to your development than 100 relationships built on entertainment and mutual validation. Look at your circle honestly. Identify the people who engage seriously with ideas, who celebrate your progress without concealed resentment, who raise your standards simply by maintaining their own. Invest in those relationships with the same seriousness you would invest in any other high return asset. Habit 9, bring your full attention to one thing at a time. The concept of multitasking has been accepted as a mark of competence in the modern era. In reality, it is a description of doing several things simultaneously at a reduced quality level. No one who claims to be multitasking is actually doing that. They are fragmenting their attention across multiple tasks in rapid succession, producing diminished results on each one, while experiencing the cognitive cost of the constant switching. Business and progress are not synonyms, and the habitual confusion of the two is responsible for an enormous amount of wasted effort. Consider the current attention landscape. People are subjected to hundreds of competing inputs every hour. A device demands attention. A notification interrupts concentration. One message leads to another, which leads to a sequence of content, and suddenly an hour has been consumed without a single meaningful output to account for it. This is not accidental. The architecture of the modern information environment is specifically designed to capture and retain attention. Every notification you respond to is a brief interruption of whatever you were building. Those interruptions compound into hours of lost productive effort every single day. The capacity to remain focused on a single meaningful task for an extended period has become genuinely rare, and like all rare things of value, it commands a premium. The world compensates people who can direct their full attention at a problem and remain there long enough to actually solve it. Speed is not the relevant variable. Direction and sustained focus are. You can move very quickly in a direction that does not lead where you intend to go, and speed will only increase the distance you travel from your actual destination. I once met a young man who presented me with a list of approximately 6 simultaneous ventures he intended to pursue, including a business, a content channel, a separate media format, and a financial trading practice. I asked him directly whether he was pursuing success or arranging for an efficient form of exhaustion. When you pursue multiple objectives simultaneously with divided attention, you typically do not achieve several things. You achieve nothing thoroughly. The seed planted in fertile ground and watered daily will grow. The seed planted and immediately dug up to examine its progress will not. Establish a clear priority for each day. One single item of genuine consequence. Bring everything you have to that item before distributing your energy across secondary concerns. 365 days of this practice produces 365 completed outputs of real substance. That is how meaningful progress accumulates. Not through the frantic management of 100 simultaneous distractions, but through the disciplined commitment to one thing at a time, executed with full presence. Sunlight dispersed across a wide area provides warmth. Concentrated, it has the capacity to ignite. The same principle governs human attention and effort. Habit 10. Practice gratitude as a daily discipline, not an occasional sentiment. The final habit is the one most people treat as the least practical, which reveals precisely why most people never fully unlock the life they are capable of living. Gratitude, practiced with genuine intention and daily consistency, is not a sentiment. It is a discipline that fundamentally restructures how you perceive your circumstances, and perception governs everything. Consider the baseline from which most people in the developed world operate. The ability to see, to move, to breathe without assistance, to access food and shelter, to communicate with people they care about. These are conditions that billions of people on this planet cannot take for granted. And yet the dominant experience of people who have all of these things is a persistent low-grade dissatisfaction oriented entirely toward what is absent. The mechanism driving that dissatisfaction is comparison, and in an era of curated digital presentation, comparison has become a continuous and largely unconscious background process. You scroll through a feed that shows you the most flattering moments from other people's lives, presented as representative of their total experience. You measure your interior reality, complete with its doubts, frustrations, and ordinary moments, against someone else's carefully selected exterior highlight. The result is an ongoing sense of deficit that has nothing to do with your actual circumstances and everything to do with the frame through which you are evaluating them. Gratitude is the discipline that interrupts that frame and replaces it with an accurate one. I remember a conversation with someone who had structured their entire emotional state around the acquisition of a particular professional role. They were convinced that obtaining that position would produce lasting satisfaction. When they achieved it, the satisfaction lasted a matter of weeks before a new target appeared on the horizon to replace the satisfaction they had consumed. This is the nature of an ungrateful mind. It is perpetually one acquisition away from contentment, which means contentment is perpetually deferred. Gratitude is not the pretense that everything is perfect. It is the honest recognition that within whatever your current circumstances contain, there are elements of genuine value. Your parents' sacrifice, the loyalty of people who chose to remain beside you, the lessons embedded in your failures, the capacity you have developed precisely because the path was difficult. These things deserve acknowledgement, and the act of acknowledging them consistently, daily, changes the quality of the attention you bring to everything else. Every person I have encountered who has built something genuinely meaningful shares this characteristic. They are grateful even in the midst of failure. Not because they are naive about the difficulty of their circumstances, but because they understand that perspective is a choice and that the perspective of gratitude tends to produce clearer thinking, stronger relationships, and more resilient pursuit of their objectives. Gratitude converts pain into information. It converts setbacks into preparation. It converts ordinary days into evidence that you are still in the fight. Tonight, before sleep, do not audit your complaints. Audit your blessings. Acknowledge how far you have traveled, even if the destination is not yet visible. You are not where you intend to be, but you are also nowhere near where you began. The happiest individuals are not those in possession of everything. They are those who have developed the capacity to genuinely appreciate what they already hold. build that capacity every single day. Because when gratitude becomes a practiced habit rather than an occasional reaction, every day carries within it the quality of a gift. And that is where real change begins, not in the acquisition of more, but in the honest recognition of what you already have. Thank you for listening. This is Master Mindset Radio, and we will see you in the next one.